I'm going to talk today about Tik Tok of Oz. This is part of the Complete Stories of Oz collection. Tik Tok of Oz is the 8th book in the canonical Oz series. It's actually the 9th book in this collection, but that's because the non-canonical Little Wizard Stories of Oz is included in this collection. But in terms of canonical books, it's the 8th book, published in 1914, and it is a mess, structurally, plot-wise, in terms of continuity, but it can at times be an interesting mess. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. I'm going to talk it out, and advanced warning, I'm going to ramble a lot. There's a lot to talk about in this book. I haven't scripted anything, so who knows? My mind may be jumping from plot point to plot point. So watch this video at your own risk, and nobody need feel obliged to watch it all the way to the end. I am doing this series as a buddy read with Dane Reads, who's reviewed it on his channel. Who's also reviewed this book on his channel, and I will link to his video in the description down below. Dane actually scripts and edits his videos, so if you don't want the long rambly version, go and click the link. You can watch his. It's 14 minutes, but it's a concise 14 minutes in which he pulls out a lot of the interesting quotes, talks about some of the interesting themes. You will find it much more organized than this video. I'm also relying on some of the Wikipedia entries. I'll link to Wikipedia down below. And I'm also relying on the review by author Mari Ness, who about 10 years ago did a whole series of reviews about the Oz series at Tor.com as part of her Oz Reread series. And highly recommend you check that out. So those are all the other resources you can check out. I'm going to ramble now. Okay, so this story is really a mess, and it's partly a mess because of its origin story. This emerged as a stage play. L. Frank Baum was always trying to turn his books into stage plays. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was a very successful stage play back in its day, 1901 or 1902. He tried to make the sequel, The Marvelous Land of Oz, into a stage play, which I think actually got produced but was not successful. And then the third book, Ozma of Oz, he tried to turn that into a stage play, and that went through a few different iterations before I think it finally got produced as the Tik Tok Man of Oz, based off the third book. But then eventually, because it had gone through a few evolutions, it was different enough from the third book that I guess L. Frank Baum thought he could pick up the script for that stage play and turn it into another book. So here we now have Tik Tok of Oz, based off the stage play, the Tik Tok Man of Oz, which in turn was an attempt to adapt Ozma of Oz. Now, I've not read the stage play on which this is based, and in fact, I think, if I remember right, Wikipedia says that actually the script for the stage play has been lost. We've got like some of the promotional material from the stage play, and we've got like some other things so people can kind of reconstruct the plot. But I think I'm remembering that right. The script for the original stage play has been lost. To be perfectly honest, even if it wasn't lost, I don't think I would go through the trouble of reading it online. But, right. Okay. So, Mari Ness, in her review of this book, which I'll link down below, calls it falling through plots. by which she means that this book is overstuffed with plots. I think she identifies 5 plots which are running through this book. Because there are a number of different plots, it's got a bit of a disjointed feel, and the individual plots themselves don't really get the attention that they deserve. On the other hand, because the book is jumping so randomly from plot point to plot point, it at least keeps you awake. And there are a number of times when I was reading it where I thought, okay, this is different. This is interesting. Where is this going to go? At the same time, I was really getting frustrated with all the inconsistencies. Both inconsistencies between this book and the rest of the Oz series, which has been an issue all along. But I think maybe it rises to a new level within this book, but also internal inconsistencies within this book. I'll be a little bit honest. I feel like L. Frank Baum is taking his readers for granted. I'm feeling a little bit frustrated with the Oz series at this point, and wondering if it's worth my time to continue with an author who so blatantly doesn't care about his own stories. On the other hand, though, I do wonder, I mean, keep in mind that this book was published in 1914 and is a continuation of a series which started all the way back in 1900, I believe is when the first Oz series came out. I'd be interested, if somebody knows more about this than me, please leave a comment and let me know. But I suspect that maybe back in those days, continuity just wasn't as much of a thing, right? I mean, nowadays, if J.K. Rowling tried to do this with the Harry Potter series, people would be all over the internet complaining about it. Even before the internet, I think, maybe beginning in the 1960s with fandoms and Marvel comics and stuff like that, people started to take continuity seriously. But my understanding is that in the history of comic books, really before the 1960s, continuity was not taken seriously in comic books. It wasn't until the 1960s that people started to be so obsessive about the continuity making sense. So maybe it just wasn't that big of a deal back then, and maybe I'm judging it by modern standards. Okay. How to talk about this? First, I guess the first thing to note is Tik Tok of Oz is really a misnomer, because the Tik Tok is a very minor character in this book. This has been a common theme all the way through this whole series, where the name of an individual book doesn't really reflect the content of it, or seldom reflects the content of it. But yeah, Tik Tok is one of many characters being juggled, and he doesn't have a particularly prominent role in this book. Tik Tok, if you don't know, Tik Tok was introduced in the 3rd book, the Ozma of Oz series. I think he's most famous or most recognizable to my generation from that Disney movie Return to Oz, which is maybe largely forgotten nowadays. But if you are of a certain age, or if you grew up watching the Disney Channel, you'll probably remember Tik Tok of Oz from that. But actually, the book doesn't even start off with Tik Tok of Oz. It starts off in the land of Ugabu, where the So Forth family and so forth, in the land of Ugabu, which is in the land of Oz somewhere. Although the kingdom of Ugabu has never been mentioned in the land of Oz before, and it's previously been mapped out. Mapped out. I misspoke slightly there, but this is maybe a good time to mention that according to Wikipedia, this is the first book to include a map of the land of Oz and the surrounding fairy lands around it, because it's been established by now that there's a bunch of different fairy lands around it. I think the map does have some inconsistencies. Like I was saying before, consistency within continuity isn't the strong point of this series. So yeah, that's a notable trivia. But anyways, we've been acquainted with the different kingdoms of Oz before. Kingdom of Ugabu is new, but okay, it's been hinted at before that there are all these little small kingdoms in the land of Oz, tucked away in the mountains or something like that. Now the king of Ugabu is Joel Jimkinth so forth, who got so sick of being nagged by his wife that he just disappeared one day. Marched out and then never came back. And then his wife went in search for him and never returned either. Now, spoilers, by the way, spoilers. I thought as I'm reading this, okay, this is setting up a plot point. This is going to be resolved later. We're going to find out where the king and queen are. They're going to get rescued or something, or they're going to come back. But it's just completely forgotten about. Like so many other plot points in this book, they're just gone and they're never mentioned again. So Queen Anne gets the idea to conquer the land of Oz. She wants to raise up an army and go and conquer the land of Oz. This, of course, is reminiscent of Ginger and her plan to conquer the land of Oz back in book 2. It's slightly different because Ginger's plan to conquer the land of Oz had a gender war bit of plot going on there. This one, Queen Anne is a girl, but the rest of her army are all men. And in fact, it's mentioned at one point that she doesn't want women in her army. One of the guys tries to get his wife to go in place of him. And again, because this is based on a stage play, which was based on one of the earlier books, plot elements and a lot of jokes get repeated. So the joke from Ozma of Oz, where you have a whole army with generals and lieutenants and captains and all the officers and only one private, that exact same joke gets repeated here, where they have only one private and then the rest of the army. So they're marching off to conquer Oz, but Linda the witch, I guess, sees what's happening because she can see everything that's happening everywhere in Oz, or it gets written down in her book, which, by the way, is one of L. Frank Baum's more uninspired decisions, because it creates a lot of inconsistencies about what they can see and what they can't see. Or, I don't know, maybe from his perspective, since he clearly doesn't care about consistency, it's one of his better decisions because it allows him a neat little place anytime he wants to just jump in and resolve stuff. But they get tricked by the magic and sent off into a different land, which is not Oz, where they have adventures fighting against a rak, which is a kind of a dragon. Dane, in his review, did a good job of picking out some of the more humorous quotes from that section. He's already done it, so I won't repeat it here, but there are some funny moments in that section. Then we completely shift, and we go over to Betsy Bobbins and Hank the donkey. Now, this is... I mean, on one level, it's sloppy storytelling. But on the other level, it does keep you interested. You're like, all right, this is interesting. I thought we were going to follow Queen Anne and her army, but now we're off following Betsy Bobbins and her donkey. Let's see where this goes. This could be interesting. Now, apparently, the reason we have Betsy Bobbins and her donkey is because L. Frank Baum could not get the rights to use Dorothy and Toto for the stage play. The rights for the books are apparently different. So he's been using Dorothy and Toto all throughout the books, but for the stage play, I guess he couldn't use those names. So he created Betsy Bobbins, who is essentially just Dorothy, and Hank the donkey, who is the animal sidekick character, who's not exactly like Toto. I mean, he's a donkey and he can kick people, but fulfills kind of a similar role. And Betsy Bobbins talks just like Dorothy. Something that has been a thing since book 3 is Dorothy talks in this kind of little girl type speak where she omits some of the syllables of her words, and Betsy Bobbins is doing this as well. Now they show up shipwrecked on an island, which is again taken right from book 3, Ozma of Oz, where Dorothy and Billina the hen show up shipwrecked on an island. And then they meet the Roses, and then there's a plot element that's taken right from book 4. I think it is Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. That's book 4, right? Yeah, Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz, book 4, where there's kind of a vegetable kingdom, and where the rulers of this vegetable kingdom are grown on a vine and just are sitting right there until they are plucked, which is directly the same as book 4. But again, we're recycling all these plot elements again. So they pluck the Rose Princess from the vine, and the Rose Princess is apparently a relative of Ozma. Now, how is Ozma related to a plant? Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm forgetting. How did they say it was related to Ozma? It's related to Ozma somehow. I haven't actually bookmarked the key parts. The princess is named Ozga, as she is a distant cousin of Ozma of Oz. Okay, so apparently in Ozma's family tree there are plants. Whatever. Now, again, according to Wikipedia, the reason that she is named Ozga is because L. Frank Baum couldn't get the rights to Ozma for the stage play, or something like that. So Dorothy becomes Betsy, Toto becomes Hank, Ozma becomes Ozga, the Rose Princess, who's a distant cousin of Ozma. Now, the question you're probably thinking, which is the same question I have, is, okay, fine. That explains why in the stage play, Tik Tok Man of Oz, they had to change everybody's names. But now that we're going back to the books, where L. Frank Baum does still have the rights to all these characters in the books, why do we keep the different names? And I don't know. I think in a way it's a little bit interesting that we have like duplicates of all these characters now in the land of Oz. Be interesting to see how these characters show up in future books and how they interact with other future books. Okay, speaking of which, though, the other thing that comes up is the Gnome King, who in previous books had been known as Roquat, Roquat, but now his name is being changed to Ruggedo, the middle monarch, Mittel, the middle monarch, Mittel, Metal. And the reason for this change is, again, that was the name he had in the stage play, was Ruggedo, the middle monarch. Now, there is actually an attempt to address this. So it says here, let me just read the whole quotation. So they're talking with the Shaggy Man. Shaggy Man says, "That's very kind of you, ma'am," says Shaggy, "but unless I can find the underground cabin of Ruggedo, the Mitzel monarch, I shall never find poor brother." And then in parentheses it says, "This king was formerly named Roquat, but after he drank of the waters of oblivion, he forgot his own name and had to take another." Okay, fair enough, maybe. It was established at the end of book 6, the Emerald City of Oz, that the Gnome King and all the other creatures from all the other monsters from the other lands around Oz had drank the waters of oblivion and completely forgotten everything, including their names. So that works, except barely a few chapters later, it's obvious that Ruggedo remembers everything that has happened to him in the previous books. Where is that? Sorry, once again, I didn't bookmark off the key parts here. But he talks about how he knows who Dorothy and Ozma are. He remembers when they tried to come into his kingdom before. He remembers how scared he was of eggs and how Dorothy had brought the hen and the egg into his kingdom. So this idea of him having lost his memory is just completely disregarded. And it's at this point that I'm starting to feel like L. Frank Baum is just taking his readers for granted. Now, granted, his readers were children, and this book was published in 1914, so it was over 100 years ago. But I don't know. One way or another, I am going to finish this book. I've committed myself to it. But there are times when I'm wondering, is this really worth my time? To answer my own question, I think yes, for no other reason than because these Oz books have had an impact on pop culture, and I think this was even more true back in the day. So I think nowadays a lot of people only remember the movie, but I think back in L. Frank Baum's day, or even afterwards, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, this Oz series was a lot more widely read than it is now. So it was worth reading just for that. Yeah. And then another thing to complain about: Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter, shows up. And Shaggy Man as well has showed up by this point. And Polychrome and Shaggy Man have met each other before in book 5, The Road to Oz, where Polychrome had fallen off the rainbow. Now, because we're recycling all these plots again, Polychrome once again appears in this book, having fallen off the rainbow again, and it's presented like it's the first time this has happened. And then the Shaggy Man shows up and meets Polychrome, and it's like they're meeting each other for the first time. Where is it? They show up. Polychrome has to explain to them who they are, who she is, and what's happened to her. And it is as she's meeting the Shaggy Man for the first time. By the way, according to Wikipedia, I think in between when L. Frank Baum attempted to end the Oz series, and then when he had to restart it again because he went bankrupt, I think he used polychrome in one of his other series that he was trying to launch, the Sea Fairies series. That's according to Wikipedia. I've not read that other book. Um, but yeah, it doesn't really matter because there's no reference to it here. So yeah, complaining about continuity. Now the other thing here, which is arguably a negative, but which I found kind of interesting, is the way plots just get introduced and then get forgotten. And like I said, this is somewhat sloppy writing, but it keeps you on your toes. So they meet up with Queen Anne and her army. And then her private, remember there's this joke where there's this whole army of officers and only one private. Her private actually defects from the army and has kind of a romance with Ozga, the Rose Princess. And apparently, according to Marie Ness and her reviews, that's because this is from the stage play. So I guess L. Frank Baum had this rule, or had this policy, that there was no romance in his Land of Oz series. And that's apparently because he had experimented by asking around with children if children were interested in it. He found out that universally children were not interested in having any romantic subplots. So he did not do any romance in the Land of Oz books. But stage plays are a different story because it apparently was a staple of the genre at that time. You could not do a stage play without having a romantic couple. So Files, who had been the one private in Queen Anne's army, defects from the army, and then he goes over and he talks to the Rose Princess Ozga. And they're often seen together, talking together. But that's it. And essentially, the two of them have nothing more to do with the plot after this. It's when the whole gang is journeying from place to place, it's mentioned that Ozga, the Rose Princess, and Private Files are going along with them. And I exaggerate a little bit. There's like one thing where Ozga is talking to the roses to try and find out where the Gnome King's underground lair is. But essentially, they're just forgotten from the story. This story has a problem a lot of these Oz stories have, where L. Frank Baum introduces a lot of characters, but then doesn't know what to do with the characters. So the whole troupe of characters is on this journey, but there are some characters who have very little to do, and Ozga, the Rose Princess, and Files essentially have nothing to do for the rest of the story, although possibly, apparently in the stage play they have more to do. Then once Files defects from the army, then Tik Tok becomes the private soldier in Queen Anne's army. They swap out Private Files for Tik Tok, which, as Marie Ness points out in her review, doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, what is Tik Tok doing joining Queen Anne's army? But whatever. The Shaggy Man has his love magnet once again. As I pointed out on Wikipedia, and as I noticed myself when I was reading this, it's another inconsistency because in this book, the Shaggy Man has to take out his love magnet for it to work on people. In the previous books, it was just the fact that the love magnet was on his person somewhere. Previous books. It was really only one book. It was the Road to Oz. but in that previous book, the love magnet was in his pocket and he didn't need to take it out. This later becomes, of course, a plot point when he has his arms bound, so he can't use the love magnet. They go through a magic tube through the center of the earth and go out into a fairyland. The imagery of the fairyland is kind of interesting. There are different fairies for different things, different elements. So there's the fairy of light, the lovely lady of light. They're essentially fairies, but they're referred to as kings and queens. So it's the queen of light. And she has different ladies who are attending her, like sunlight, daylight, firelight, moonlight, Electra for electric light. As Dane pointed out in his review, there's an introduction here about like an ancient dragon who was there at the creation of the world and whose descendants have gone into different parts of the world. And it's as Dane says in his review, and I agree with him completely, it almost seems like a little bit of a Tolkien-esque mythos or high fantasy being introduced into the Land of Oz, which normally has more of a silly type atmosphere. So it's interesting. I'd bet anything that it's completely dropped in the next book, or it's treated with inconsistency, and I don't trust L. Frank Baum to build up a consistent mythos in the following books, but it's interesting for what it is. So they go back in the tube with Quox the dragon, Marie Ness points out in her reviews of this book that this is yet another one of the plots they're juggling. So they're juggling, the different plots are Queen Anne trying to conquer the Land of Oz, Shaggy Man trying to find his brother who's been imprisoned by the Gnome King, Betsy, Bobbins, and Hank the Donkey, who were dropped off in the Land of Oz from a shipwreck and are trying to get home. They're not dropped off in the Land of Oz. They're dropped off in one of the fairy kingdoms around the Land of Oz. Then there's Private Files romance with Ozga, the Rose Princess. And then there's the fairy kingdom on the other side of the world, and Quox the dragon. Quox the dragon has been in disgrace because he said something rude to the elder. So now to redeem himself, Quox the dragon is sent back by Titty Hoochoo, also known as Jinjin. I don't know why he has two names, but he's got two names. He's Jinjin and Titty Hoochoo. So Quox the dragon is sent back, and he's got to redeem himself by conquering the Gnome King. Then they go, I mean, it's just very hard to summarize this book because it's just a mess structurally. But it's interesting, kind of all these different plot points kind of jumping around. I found it interesting, and I found a lot of the imagery in this book interesting. The fairy kingdom on the other side of the world, the long hollow tube in which you slide down was interesting. The middle forest in the Gnome King's dominions were interesting. What arguably saves this book is some of the different imagery in it that makes this interesting to read, even as I'm feeling frustrated with how little respect L. Frank Baum seems to be treating his readers or his readers' intelligence. What else did I want to say? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. There's something else I was going to say. The dragon, the Gnome King. Oh, right. The middle forest has this thing where the Shaggy Man's brother is being held captive in the middle forest. And he's getting, there are these trees that grow, which have like 3-course meals in them. So they're like a coconut. You unscrew the coconut, and there'll be like a coffee in the coconut, a cup of coffee in the coconut. There'll be like a salad and a meal and a dessert. And it's just these meals ready-made hanging on the trees, which I'm going to complain about because that is also a recycled gag from book number 3, Ozma of Oz, when Dorothy gets shipwrecked on this land in which the trees are growing lunchboxes. The trees growing anything and everything is actually already in this book in the beginning in the land of Ugabu with Queen Anne. But I don't know, it's arguably cleverly done in that point. And Dane in his review pointed out that the idea of Files, who lives in a land where the trees grow storybooks, is interesting, and he talks about how you have to wait until the storybooks are ripe, otherwise the spelling or grammar is going to be all wrong, and then once they're ripe, you have to read them quickly before they spoil. And as nobody else is around to read the books, Files, who is tending to these trees, has to read all the stories himself. Oh, okay, all right. I'll give that a pass. That's interesting. I'm looking at the timer on this video. I've been blabbling on for 36 minutes, and there are more things I think I could talk about in here, more interesting plot elements, more inconsistencies. Sorry, there's one more thing. Gotta get this off my chest. The magic belt. So, the end of the book, we find out, this is another problem throughout this series. L. Frank Baum has introduced so many magical elements that it's almost impossible to have a story anymore, have any stakes, unless you forget about all those magical elements until the end of the book, which is what he frequently does. So Ozma's got a magic painting in which she can see everything. The Wizard of Oz, who I think is referred to now as the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Am I remembering that right? In the previous book, he was referred to the Little Wizard of Oz. He seems to go back and forth between those two names. They're watching it on their magic picture, and Ozma has the Wonderful Wizard of Oz transport everyone back into Oz. Now, previously, when people needed to be transferred back and forth to Oz, it was done by means of Ozma's magic belt. But apparently that magic belt is forgotten about now. And there are so many magical creatures in Oz, I guess that belt is redundant now if the wizard can just transport people around. I mean, the whole plot really makes no sense because Tik Tok, the whole reason Tik Tok is in this book in the first place is because Ozma had sent him to deal with the Gnome King. But that doesn't make any sense because they find Tik Tok in a well, they meaning Betsy and Queen Anne, because the Gnome King had put him in the well because he had been sent by Ozma to try and rescue Shaggy Man's brother. But why did Ozma just send him there? And then if Ozma and the wizard are watching everything in the magic picture, then why did they let Tik Tok get abandoned in the well? I don't know. I guess you just have to accept when you read these Oz books that at the very end it's not going to make any sense because it's just going to be accepted that Ozma is watching everything on her magic picture and could have intervened at any point, but didn't. Then everyone comes back to the land of Oz, and we've got the standard thing where everybody meets everybody. So, Dorothy shows up again and Toto. Now, Dorothy had not been in this book so far because we had Betsy, Bobbins, and Hank. But again, that was a problem with the rights for the stage play. Now that we're back in the book, there's no problem bringing Dorothy back in at the end. Ozma briefly discusses what Marie Ness refers to as Oz's immigration policy, where she talks about how, what does she say? She does not want to let everybody in Oz. Yes, she says, the land of Oz is not a refuge for all mortals in distress, explained Ozma. I do not wish to be unkind to Shaggy Man, but his brother has no claim on me. The land of Oz isn't crowded, suggested Dorothy. Then you advise me to admit Shaggy's brother? Inquired Ozma. Well, we can't afford to lose our Shaggy Man, can we? No, indeed, returned Ozma. What do you say, wizard? I'm getting my magic ready to transport them all. But then later it's mentioned. Where is it? Leaving the brothers, Ozma and the girls continued their walk. Now, at this point, Betsy Bobbins is staying in the land of Oz. I don't know what happened to Betsy's family. I don't know if she has family. I mean, with Dorothy, before Dorothy stays in the land of Oz, it's Auntie Em and Uncle Henry are transported to Oz permanently with her. With Betsy, why am I even trying to make logical sense of this? Anyways, Betsy says, Betsy explained, Shaggy's brothers can't ever be as happy in Oz as I am. Do you know, Dorothy, I didn't believe any girl could ever have such a good time anywhere as I'm having now. I know, answered Dorothy. I felt that way myself lots of times. I wish, continued Betsy dreamily, that every little girl in the world could live in the land of Oz, and every little boy too. Ozma laughed at this. It's quite fortunate for us, Betsy, that your wish cannot be granted, she said. For all that army of girls and boys would crowd us, so that we would have to move away. Yes, agreed Betsy after a little thought. I guess that's true. So, Ozma has a very conservative immigration policy. You go and deal with your own troubles in your own country. The land of Oz, we don't want to be crowded here, so you resolve your own problems in your own country. We're not taking in refugees. In fact, she says that quite directly, right? The land of Oz is not a refuge for all mortals in distress. We are not taking in refugees to the land of Oz. This is our land. You stay out, except for Ozma's friends. Ozma's friends get let in. But even putting that aside, what an odd way to end the book. I wish, continued Betsy dreamily, every little girl in the world could live in the land of Oz, and every little boy too. So L. Frank Baum is saying to his readers, here's this magical land of Oz where you could be so happy. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could all live in this land of Oz? But you can't. There's a strict immigration policy. And I realize that even children, even his target audience, the children, know that this is all fantasy and that it's not real and that he's playing with them. But still, why not say to your readers, all these children who are reading your book, look, kids, you can be perfectly happy in your own world. Happiness lies within you, or something like that. Work hard, eat your vegetables, try and help other people and be kind, and you can build your own utopia, or I don't know. So, some sort of message to kids like that, rather than saying, kids, there's this magical fairyland where you could be so happy, but you can't get in, and that's the end of the book, and that is the end of the book. Yes, agreed Betsy after a little thought. I guess that's true. And that's where the book ends. And that's where I'll end this review.